welcome. As my tiny little YouTube channel is 2 years old this month, I've been looking back at some of my earlier videos, and they're rough. However, they do make my current stuff, which, let's be honest, isn't great, look like a work of art, so by comparison, I'm doing well. Anyway, one of my earliest videos was selling off the majority of my Nintendo DS collection in order to buy a Nintendo Switch, which I did. All I kept was one DS Lite and these 10 games. However, I did get seller's remorse quite quickly, and over the last 2 years I've built up a new, smaller, streamlined Nintendo collection for the DS, and I thought I'll share it with you wonderful people. I can't go quite as far as to say that it's all killer, no filler, but there's some good stuff there. One of the ways I've saved money and space is I've just been buying loose cartridges and storing them in these cases. They cost me, I think, £3 off AliExpress. What I've done is I've grouped the games into very loose categories so I can show you one or two from each one. So let's explore my improved Nintendo DS collection. And we're going to kick off with the 6 Spider-Man games I've got left over from my original collection. And I'll show you some gameplay from The Amazing Spider-Man. Little side tangent, if you can get The Amazing Spider-Man on the 3DS, that's a really good looking 3D game. Not the greatest game in the world, but it looks great. The Spider-Man games on the DS all look similar, really good, solid side-scrollers, reminiscent of the games you used to play on the Super Nintendo and the 16-bit generation. Another 2 games that I kept from the original collection is both of the Assassin's Creed games. These are actually marvellous fun. I don't think I'll ever part with these. And I've got Assassin's Creed 1 up and running for you. As you can see, reasonable 3D. I'm always quite impressed when the DS does 3D, just because of the age of the system. These games play very similar to the Assassin's Creed Chronicles games. You know, where you got India, Russia and China, I believe is the other one. Really good, solid gameplay. Look good on the handheld as well. I've had a really good time with these, and as someone who likes the original format of the Assassin's Creed games with Altair and Ezio, really good fun. If you like Assassin's Creed, particularly the earlier style of games, definitely pick these up. A couple of individual games here which I couldn't think of any specific category to place them into. So I've got Ninja Gaiden up and running. As you can see, it's in the book format, which is unusual. Normally it's the top and bottom screen. I've only got one other game which plays like this. Works very well for the game though. You control everything with the stylus. The buttons don't do anything from memory. Different gestures and swipes and things do different moves. As you can see as I'm playing this, I don't know exactly what does what. I'm pretty much just having a bit of a swipe mash and seeing what happens. Good fun game though. Hotel Dusk Room 215 is one of the very few horror games available on the Nintendo DS. It again plays in the book format. It's the only other game I've got that plays like this. Really good looking game. It is quite cutscene heavy. It's not quite an interactive movie, but it plays along those lines. I'm ashamed to say I haven't actually got that far through this game yet. It's definitely one I need to pick up and play some more of, because it's meant to be absolutely brilliant, and I was very, very happy when I picked it up. But you know what it's like, we've all got backlogs. RPGs are of course plentiful. Here's at least 2 of 3 that I'm sure you'll be familiar with, Chrono Trigger and Zelda Phantom Hourglass. Orcs and Elves is another one I got left over from my original collection. I kept it just because I've never played it. I have played it since, and I've got to say it's a bit disappointing, so we'll go with showing you some Zelda. Not the most popular game in the Legend of Zelda franchise, but I actually remember really enjoying it when I played it. It's another game that I did have previously and got seller's remorse on, so I bought it back. Well, I haven't actually replayed it since I rebought it. Anyway, standard Zelda fare, doesn't look bad at all. I do think the better RPGs on this are some of the original Final Fantasy ports that they put on it. I do have those in a different format, which I'll show you at the end of the video. Next up, we have some squad-based shooters. I'm using that term very loosely, but you do have other people and other members of your squad in B Team Metal and Operation Vietnam. Unit 47 is one of my favourite games on the DS. I would class it as a hidden gem. I'm going to show you a little bit about that one now. All stylus controlled, obviously with the touchscreen mechanic, most games leaned into it that way. This is only a very beginning sort of tutorial level, I'm afraid, but it gets a lot more energetic when you get the full battles and the proper enemies as you play through. As you can see with this one, though, you can see how it looks and how it plays. You can see that I've changed to a different squad member to overcome an obstacle, in this case a locked gate. And you can also see some of the shooting mechanics where you just tap on things and they fire. You can split the team, or you can just play as all together. It reminds me of a more modern Cannon Fodder, and if anybody's ever played Cannon Fodder, you'll know that's a very high compliment, because that's a brilliant game, that is. The DS, of course, came out when The Sims was extremely popular, and there are many versions of that on the system. I never liked The Sims, but I do like simulation games, my favourites being Zoo Tycoon and Theme Park. I remember playing Theme Park all the way back on the Sega Mega Drive. It's been on numerous consoles, actually, and if you haven't played it, play it. This DS version is as good as any other version I've played, truthfully. It really does work well. As you can see here, you can lay it out, put the paths and things as you want. Obviously, I'm not playing it properly. I'm just trying to show you that the game works in the same manner as it does on consoles and PC. You've got to remember it's quite an old game, so adapting it to this hardware probably not that difficult, and you've got a really good solid version. If you ever enjoyed this and you want some nostalgia, I think I got this game for around £3 or £4 off eBay. It's not expensive and it's hours of fun. One of my favourite franchise of all time is and always will be Tomb Raider, and you've got two games for this here. You've got Tomb Raider Legend and Tomb Raider Underworld. This was still in the age when, if you got a handheld version of the game, it was worth playing even if you'd played through the console version, just because it was different enough to warrant a separate playthrough. They play in a 2.5D-ish style. It's probably a little bit more 3D than 2.5, but you get what I mean. You can see on screen. They play really well. I've got them both and I've played through them both multiple times. This was still classic Lara. I often talk about the Survive trilogy and still liking it, even though a lot of people don't. But I do agree that they took away a lot of what made Lara, whereas these, I think, still play true to the original character. I'm actually really impressed with these ports on the DS, because it was never the most powerful console in the whole wide world, but these just work, and they work well. That said, the PSP versions are better. Apart from the superb Mario Kart 7, there aren't many racing games on the DS, probably due to lack of power and just limitations of the console itself. That said, Need for Speed Undercover is a good solid racer on the little handheld. Plays well enough, it's an arcade racer, certainly not a simulation, but really good fun. As with the Tomb Raider games, you'll find racing games on the PSP, which of course was the competition at the time. And yes, they do play better on it by virtue of having a bit more power, but that doesn't mean that the little DS is lacking. I suppose, in some ways though, if you've got access to Mario Kart, what other racers do you need? I'd be interested to know if anybody else can recommend some good solid racers for the little DS. You might be surprised to learn that there are some first-person shooters on the Nintendo DS. Now, I struggle to recommend them because honestly I think they don't play that brilliantly. That said, as a novelty and a bit of fun, this is, as you saw, Call of Duty World at War. It's also got some vehicle sections which actually do work really well. You control your character in the movements with the D-pad. If you're left-handed, you can change it to use the buttons. You shoot with the trigger, and then you use the stylus to control, aim, move your player. It works okay. It definitely gives you a bit of cramp in your hands after a little while because you have to hold it in quite an uncomfortable position, but they're a novelty. I've also got GoldenEye, which is the worst version of GoldenEye possible, and Brothers in Arms as well, just for free. The way it controls is definitely a novelty, and for a bit of fun, which is all these are meant to be, of course, not bad. Many of the Lego games, of course. I've got here Indiana Jones 2, that's also got the Crystal Skull on it, as well as the original trilogy. and Lego Batman. We all know what Lego games look like, so I'm not going to take your time up showing you those. Here we have a selection of 3D games. You may have seen my video on Cop the Recruit. I still think that's one of the best looking 3D DS games there is. These are just some of the games that I think look the best. Not necessarily play the best, but look the best. I mean, Splinter Cell plays horribly, but it doesn't look bad. I'm showing you here Freedom Wings. It's one of those games which perhaps doesn't play fantastically, but it does look quite good. I must apologise profusely for the angle of the DS, by the way. Didn't realise that I had it at the wrong angle when I captured this footage, and I've captured so much DS footage I'm DS'd out. I can't bring myself to go back. But you get an idea of what it looks like anyway, and they're all up to quite a high standard of presentation. I am going to do a separate video about some of the best looking 3D games on the DS in the future. If you fancy the idea of that, maybe subscribe. If you don't, subscribe anyway, you know, help a guy out. The DS is of course home to a great many licensed video games. Here's a selection of the ones I've got here, and my favourite without fail is Ghostbusters. As you can see, you can walk around the firehouse. You also get to drive Ecto 1 around, although it gets damaged very easily, so try not to crash too much. And you can chase ghosts with the mounted proton pack on the roof rack, which is a nice little extra, because that's not in the original game this is modelled on, which is Ghostbusters, the video game. And then when you go into the locations to shoot the ghosts, you can control individually any of the 4 Ghostbusters, unless you go into a bit where you're limited to just 1 or 2, but that's part of the game. Shoot the ghosts with your proton pack, capture them with your trap. It's just really good fun. At the minute, it's probably my favourite licensed game on the DS. And if you haven't played it, give it a go, because it's not expensive. Most of these games, actually, are fairly cheap to pick up. This certainly is, and it's hours of fun. And finally, we have my multi-cart, 208 games in one. I did give this a separate video. I'll put a link to it on the end screen, which you'll be seeing shortly anyway. This contains a great deal of my favourite games, including Mario Kart, the Final Fantasy games, Grand Theft Auto, Chinatown Wars, just to name a few. And it's why I perhaps do have some missing from my collection, which you might expect me to have. Because I've got the games this way, I don't feel the need to own original copies that are quite expensive, because collecting isn't always cheap, and with the DS I've tried to keep it streamlined and cost effective. So there you have it, a glimpse into my streamlined DS collection. As I said at the beginning, I can't exactly call it all killer, no filler, but I've got a lot more good games that I do want to play than I had before. I'm quite pleased with it. Obviously it's not finished, you never stop collecting, but I'm quite happy with what I've got, and there's only a relatively small amount of games I want to add. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see some of the games from my collection which I think could be hidden gems, click here. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Ta-da for now.